Alright, here's our third installment of plant evolution, and what I would like for you to have in mind as we're going through this are the steps in plant evolution. If you can commit this little diagram to memory, it will probably help. So I'm going to draw something that looks like a really weird pitchfork here. Okay, so if this is a phylogeny is a family tree. Here is the common ancestor to all of these members. These are all modern living organisms up top. So this is the ancient common ancestor, okay, to all of them. And here we see a branching point where something split off. But here we see basically this guy continuing on. This represents the green algae. Okay, so what we are saying here is that green algae and the branch that split from them, those mosses, the division Bryophyta, the mosses, they share a common ancestor. Okay, their common ancestor would actually be right there in this pattern. Okay, now the mosses are also going to branch and give rise. So the mosses and whatever comes after them, that's going to be right here, also share a common ancestor, but more recently than the mosses and the algae. And then we're going to have another split and another split, and we're going to see common ancestors here and here. Okay, so this is where we've been. We know about the green algae and the mosses. We're going to go step forward up into the next level of plant evolution. Now I do want to remind you, what did the mosses do that split them off from the green algae? Well, they got adapted to land. How did they do that? They got a cuticle, they got stomata, they got spores. Okay, that's about it. They still were like the green algae in many respects, the swimming sperm and all that, but these adaptations allowed them to become better adapted to land. Okay, I didn't even think of their little root-like structures. So, at any rate, now the next major group then is going to be called the vascular plants. This is not taxonomy. This is not taxonomy. This is not a classification. It's just a helpful grouping. There are several groups of plants that are vascular plants. All this means is that they have vascular tissue. And if you'll remember, vascular tissue is the tissue that acts like pipes for efficient transport. It's like plumbing, efficiently transporting liquid, water, and nutrients up and down the body of a plant. Okay, it is not a true taxonomic category. In fact, it contains 9 plant divisions. Please remember that division in plants is the same thing as phylum and everything else. I don't know why it has to be different. We just need to accept it. Okay, all vascular plants are more advanced than the bryophytes. Bryophytes are the mosses. Okay, these are the mosses. They're all more advanced than them because they have vascular tissue. Okay, and this is telling you what vascular tissue is. All right, transporting food and water efficiently through the plant, and also nutrients from the soil, which are different from food. Food in this case, always remember, is an organic compound, usually sugar, usually glucose, which is different from some mineral you might get out of the soil, like potassium or something like that. Alright, remember, vascular plants allow plants to grow way bigger than if you don't have vascular tissue. And it also means the plants that have vascular tissue, we are now going to say that they have true roots, true leaves, and true stems, because this all implies the presence of vascular tissue. Okay? Now, there are 3 main groups of vascular plants: the seedless vascular, another group called the gymnosperms, and a third group called the angiosperms. We're going to talk about them in steps. The first step is the seedless vascular. Now, notice what this is telling us about this group. They're seedless. They still don't have seeds to disperse their young, which means they're going to still be relying on spores. Spores are really inferior, not as good as seeds. Okay? But they do have vascular tissue, which means they're going to be able to do something that the moss couldn't do, and that means they're going to be able to get big. Okay? So, these are the most primitive vascular plants, the most ancient ones. Ferns are the best example we have alive today. They're not the only example, but they are the most common and most recognized. Okay? They make spores like the moss did with no seeds, but again, they are lots bigger than moss due to that vascular tissue. Like the moss and the algae before them, they still have swimming sperm. Again, this is why you don't generally see ferns growing out in an open field. They're generally growing by a creek or somewhere with lots and lots of moisture. However, they again are different from moss in the vascular tissue they have, and we are going to see a new thing here. This time, the gametophytes are very tiny. They are small. We're not going to notice them, and what is going to be the dominant form is that sporophyte. This time, the sporophyte is actually going to be photosynthetic. Not like it was in the moss, where it was brown and completely dependent on the female. So there's a difference in the way the life cycle is going to appear to us. We're not going to notice the gametophyte. The sporophyte is going to be the big one, whereas it was the opposite with the moss. All right. This is a quick look at a life cycle of a fern and how it's similar to but different from the moss. Please note that we have this big old sporophyte. If you go out and you see a Boston fern hanging at the greenhouse, it's huge. You know, they can have very nice big plant bodies. So this is certainly big and can be seen. These are the leaves right here. These are the leaves, and they are true leaves, again, because they have vascular tissue. Now, interestingly, in ferns, we see something that we don't see in some other plants, and that is a horizontal stem. We think of stems as being upright, but this is a horizontal stem called a rhizome with an M. Okay? A rhizome gives rise to leaves that go up above the ground, as we can see here, and roots that go down further into the ground to get water. So that's kind of something different. But on this sporophyte that is quite dominant, we will see spores form, okay, or actually spore cases like we saw in the moss called sporangia. They often form on the back. If this is my fern leaf, if we lift it up and look at the back, we can often see spore cases arising on the back. We looked at some, or will, depending on when you're watching this, look at some in class. Now, if we magnify, zoom in on a spore case, we can see it looks something like this. And in it, just like in the spore case in the moss, meiosis occurs because this is a sporophyte. It is a diploid structure. And we're going to make spores that are haploid. So we're going to cut the chromosome number in half. We need to do meiosis. So finally, when it's mature, the spore case opens, the spore flies out, and it starts growing. It grows into a gametophyte. This weird looking little tiny thing is going to produce gametes. It is going to make gametes. It's going to make sperm and egg. One region of this little heart shape, when he grows up and matures, notice how he is kind of heart shaped here. He will make sperm producing structures and egg producing structures. Now, sperm will be released and swim to egg. Usually they don't swim to the eggs on their same gametophyte because really that would just be asexual reproduction. Usually they swim to a different gametophyte, and what we have there, you see Mr. Sperm going into the reproductive structure on the female part, and we see fertilization happening. Sperm meets egg, we get a zygote. Now, that zygote is diploid. It has now got two sets of chromosomes, one from mom, one from dad. It starts growing by mitosis. It grows right up out of the female reproductive structure, and we will see a new sporophyte emerge. But unlike the sporophyte and the moss, it can do photosynthesis. It's not dependent. It can live on its own, so it will not depend on this gametophyte and will quickly overshadow that structure. So then we're back to sporophyte. So that is your basic fern life cycle. I wouldn't memorize the steps to this. I would notice the point of it. Again, we're alternating between diploid and haploid body forms, gametophyte, sporophyte body forms. That's the main thing, and that we have now a dominant sporophyte instead of the dominant form being the gametophyte. There you go. There's a fern looking like ferns should in the shade and lush green. Here is a fern here. I'm going to go through this life cycle in pictures. If we turned the leaves of this over, we might see these spore cases growing on the back. Each of these things is a spore case called a sporangium. Okay, so all of this tissue is diploid that we're looking at, all of it. This leaf, these spore cases, all diploid. But inside the spore case, which we have now magnified enormously, there is meiosis occurring to create spores. And when it's mature, those spores will be released. So that is a spore right there, and it is haploid because meiosis occurred inside this spore case. And here we see the spore growing. It is growing into a gametophyte plant, which will be haploid because the spore was haploid. Okay, and it's going to grow into one of these. These are both photos of gametophyte ferns. Okay, each of them has male and female parts that are going to produce sperm and egg, both of which are haploid. Okay, sperm will swim to egg. Here's those reproductive parts. I don't know if they're probably female, but I'm not certain. Those reproductive parts, they're magnified on the gametophyte. Sperm will swim to egg, fertilize the egg, and then if you look here, here's the little gametophyte stuck to the log, and here's a little sporophyte growing right out of it. And we actually have several little sporophytes growing out of their little gametophytes. So we let that sporophyte grow, and we get another beautiful fern, and we start the life cycle all over again. Okay, here's some more different sporangia on ferns, and that's our life cycle. And it's important for you to know there was a period in Earth's history where ferns were the dominant life cycle. Dominant plant form. Dinosaurs, early dinosaur times. You look at the size of this dragonfly here; it's huge. The world would have looked somewhat different. Okay, in the land in the time before seed plants evolved. Alright, now we're going to take a break, and when we come back we're going to talk about our last couple of groups, the seed plants, those that don't make flowers and those that do. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.